The red dust of Mamfi clung to my shoes like ancestral warning. The road from Kumba had always felt long, but that day the air was heavier. Mamfi, the land of my birth, was silent in a way that screamed. Even the forest trees along the roadside leaned back as if they too feared the soldiers. I had not set foot in Mamfi in 6 years. 6 years since the town fell under the boot of La République's colonial forces. 6 years since my younger cousin, Anjo, was gunned down by a patrol for walking home after curfew. And now I was back, not because I felt safe, but because something had been calling me, something more than family, a whisper that clawed at the back of my mind every time I closed my eyes at night. I thought it was grief or memory or guilt. I was wrong. The checkpoint at Okoyong came into view like a scar across the land. Camouflage uniforms swarmed the road like vultures. Their rifles were loaded, the nozzles wrapped in red cloth, blood colored and fluttering in the sunless wind. That red cloth unnerved me more than their guns. Pull over, a voice barked in French. My driver stopped. I kept my eyes down as they approached. One of the soldiers had a twitch in his neck, as if something inside him was always on edge. Another reeked of sweat and cologne. Papier? The twitching one demanded. I handed over my ID. His eyes scanned it like a predator, unsure if the prey was worth eating. Then he looked up at me, and for a moment our eyes met. His were hollow, not tired, empty. Pourquoi Mamfi? He asked. To visit my grandmother, I lied. He grunted, handed back the ID, and motioned us on. As we drove, I looked back. The soldier stared after us like he saw something on me I couldn't, like something had followed me. Mamfi was a ghost town wearing human skin. Shops were shuttered, homes were quiet, and people moved like shadows. Every face I passed seemed older, worn down not just by time but by fear. Children no longer laughed on the streets. Instead, they peeked from cracked doorways like prisoners. My grandmother's compound was tucked behind the old Presbyterian church. I greeted her with a tight hug and the lie that everything was okay. That night, while eating ekwang in the back kitchen, I asked her how things really were. She looked around before whispering, "We dey live like people we don't die, but them no bury we." She told me the soldiers came every night. Sometimes they took food, other times they took girls. A girl from the next compound, barely 13, had been dragged into the bush weeks ago. She never came back. When her mother confronted the commander the next morning, they beat her until her eyes swelled shut. "No one get voice again," grandmother said. "But the land get ear. The land they hear all things." 3 days into my visit, I learned about what happened to Ngong, the boy from the next quarter. He was 20, quiet and loved drawing. One day, he went to fetch water. He never came back. His body was found the next morning in the bush, face down, throat cut. No one said anything out loud, but everyone knew. Soldiers. His father, Pan Tambeng, buried him that same day. but not before performing an old ritual, one from before the missionaries. He placed a dagger in Ngong's coffin. Then he poured libation of bitter cola, palm oil, and goat blood, whispering instructions to his son's spirit. You no go rest, you go watch them, you go follow them, you go bring them down one by one. 2 days later, the soldiers arrested Pan Tambeng. They said it was for inciting rebellion, but everyone knew it was because they feared what he'd done. Because the red cloth on their guns no longer felt like protection, it now felt like bait. It began slowly. The first night, I dreamt of someone standing by my window, a shadow, no face, no movement, just watching. The second night, I heard whispers in the walls, in a language I couldn't place, but understood anyway, blood for blood, debt unpaid. The third night, it rained hard. The sound of the downpour masked the gunshots at first, but when the screaming started, I rushed outside with the others. A soldier had shot himself. In the middle of the road, no warning, no skirmish, just laughter, then a scream, then the gun to his mouth. People said he went mad, started yelling about seeing someone walking inside his skin. Another soldier fled the same night, screaming into the bush. His comrades shot after him, but no one went to retrieve his body. When they did go back in the morning, all they found were boots and his red cloth, now black with dried blood. I started asking questions, quietly, discreetly. People were afraid, but not of the army. They were afraid of something older, the red cloth. One woman told me, "Na charm, e suppose be for stop juju, but this one no dey work, because the juju wey dem fight no come from prison, e come from the land, e come from that boy grave." Old men whispered that spirits don't forget when they are buried angry. Ngong's soul, buried with a knife and curse, had become something else, something that watched from the trees, something that seeped into the air the soldiers breathed. One night, I walked past the barracks by the old council hall. The soldiers were drunk, laughing, but one of them, Zhang, maybe 21, sat alone, staring at the fire. He kept whispering the same word, Ngong, Ngong, Ngong. His hands shook. His rifle lay untouched beside him. The red cloth on the barrel had unraveled. The next morning, he was gone. His uniform hung on a branch outside the barracks. It was my last night in Mamfi. The air was heavy. Thunder rumbled without lightning. The animals were quiet, too quiet. Then the moon darkened. An eclipse. It was not expected, but it came anyway, like something called it. The sky turned red. The wind howled. Doors banged open on their own. Then came the sound. Drums from the forest, rhythmic, angry, not played by human hands. People began to chant, unintentionally, as if possessed. Old words, forgotten words. Tatangong, Ayi Abe, Tatangong, Moto Abe. The soldiers came out, guns drawn, but none of them could see what we saw. Ngong walked through the street. His body was still, his face blank, but his eyes, they burned. He did not touch anyone. He just walked toward the barracks. Every light inside exploded. Every soldier fell to the ground, convulsing. Some died instantly. Others screamed until they stopped breathing. The commander tried to shoot him. The bullet passed through. And then the commander set himself on fire. Ngong kept walking. When he reached the end of the road, He disappeared. The eclipse ended. The sky returned. But Manfi had changed. The next morning, the army evacuated. No explanation, no press, just left. They left their tents, their trucks, their ammunition. They even left the red cloth. People began to emerge from hiding, singing, dancing, crying. But no one went near the barracks, not for a week. When they did, they found carvings on the walls in dried blood. I watch, I remember, I am not done. Pan Tambeng was released days later. He came back quiet, calm. When I asked him what he told his son's spirit, he looked me in the eye and said, "Justice no dey come from court, it came from grave." I left Manfi the next day, but I did not leave alone. Something follows you when you bear witness. Even now, when I sleep, I see the red cloth. I hear the drums. And sometimes, when I pass a military checkpoint, I see a soldier twitch. His eyes dart around like prey. And I know Ngong is still watching, waiting, because the battle was never physical. It was spiritual. And it has only just begun. Crystal had heard that the sea was blue in Europe. She used to imagine it, calm, endless, a place where grief could drown and never return. That dream kept her alive in the streets of Bamenda after the army raided her village. It comforted her during the hunger, the beatings, the shame of fleeing with only her name. So when the boat came, she didn't hesitate. A rubber dinghy, black and bloated with bodies, some already half dead with hope. 132 people. A whisper away from Europe, or so they thought. The sea was silent that night, almost reverent, as if too held its breath. Then the lights came, and the shooting started. At first, they thought it was the Italian Coast Guard. But the uniforms were clean, too clean, the guns too eager. Crystal barely had time to scream before bullets tore the night open. Her boyfriend, Douglas, was beside her 1 second, then gone the next, swallowed by the waves without a sound. Bodies trashed. Some leaped overboard to escape the hail of metal. The dinghy flipped once, then again. Hands grabbed Crystal, hard, cold. Plastic ties bound her wrists. The men spoke Arabic, but their eyes spoke something worse, a hunger older than language. They dragged the survivors back, not to land, but to something worse. The building looked abandoned. It was once a tile factory, now it was hell. The windows were blacked out with soot. The walls smelled of blood and vomit. Guards in fake military uniforms patrolled with machetes and AKs. Inside, people were stacked like meat. Cameroonians, Senegalese, Eritreans, Ghanaians. "They don't care where you're from," whispered a girl with sunken eyes. "Only what you are worth." Christelle was spared rape only because she was visibly pregnant. Others weren't. Each night, the guards would scour the room with torches, choosing girls at random, dragging them by the hair, their screams swallowed by concrete walls. Men were not safe either. Some were sold for labor, others for sport. One boy was found hanging by his wrist, skinned from the back like a haunted animal, and still worse things came in the night. Christelle began hearing things. It started as voices under the floor, muffled sobs, chanting in dialect she didn't know. Then came the dreams. In one, she saw Douglas underwater, his eyes wide, lips moving in slow motion. Behind him, shadowy figures danced in the current, faceless but humming. The sea does not forget, they whispered. The sea remembers blood. One night, she awoke to find the floor wet beneath her. No one else noticed, but in the far corner, a woman began to scream. Her belly bloated unnaturally. She clutched it, convulsing, and then something burst from her. Not a child, something else. It slithered under the blankets. The guards came running, but found nothing. The woman was dead, but her eyes kept moving, even as they dragged her body out. After 3 weeks of hell, Christelle's ransom came through. 1 million francs CFA, scraped together from a dozen relatives. They said she was free. A man in a taxi came to get her. He smiled too much, said his name was Youssef. But something was wrong. She sat in the back, watching his eyes in the rear view mirror. They were cold, calculating. He passed the road to the car, kept driving. Where are we going? She asked. Shortcut, he lied. That's when she saw it. In the side mirror, something crawled behind them, pale, wet, human-shaped, but bent the wrong way. Youssef didn't see it, but he felt it. The engine choked. The radio hissed in tongues. His smile broke. He tried to turn the car, but the steering locked. The figure climbed onto the roof. There was no sound, only screaming. Christelle woke in a hospital days later. They said she was found on the beach, dazed, barefoot, blood on her belly. Her baby, Brittany, was born 2 nights later. A girl, silent at birth, not even a cry. The nurses said that was bad luck, but Christelle knew better. The child's eyes were like Douglas, old, watching. The doctor said she talked in her sleep in languages no one understood. She called for the drowned, said things like, "Bring the moon closer. Blood does not sink. We are coming." Foka, another Cameroonian, returned home that same week. He had been sold twice ransomed, twice betrayed, twice beaten until he could no longer feel his own face. He had scars across his skull from being hung upside down and swung into walls like meat. But he didn't cry, he didn't blink, because he too had seen what Christelle saw. There are creatures in the water, he whispered, not fish, not human. He told of being held in a desert shack with others when a storm hit, a sandstorm that bled. When it passed, every guard was dead. One had been crushed from the inside, another drowned in a dry room. The third tried to burn himself alive, but was already dead when the match lit. Only the prisoners survived, and none of them remembered how they escaped. Christelle and Foka were flown back to Cameroon as part of a voluntary return program. They came back as a different people, not broken, changed. The village where Christelle grew up no longer welcomed her. Neighbors whispered that her child never blinked, that she smiled at the moon too often. One night, the village chief tried to have her exiled, said she brought bad spirits with her. That night, he died in his sleep. His eyes were missing. His bed was soaked with sea water, and the sun outside his door spelled a name, Douglas. In the cities, migrants kept disappearing, not by traffickers, but by something else, Taxi drivers who once sold people now found their cars abandoned. Windshields shattered from the inside. Fake officers in uniform were found floating in wells, mouths full of salt. Every time the red scarf Christelle used to bind her child's hair was found at the scene. The same kind Douglas wore before the sea took him. And in every CCTV footage, blurry as it was, a figure was seen nearby, a child or something shaped like one, watching. Years later, journalists tried to find Christelle again. Her home was empty. No neighbors remembered her. But every year, on the anniversary of her arrival, a storm would hit the coast, only over the sea, and the waves would whisper names, real names, traffickers, smugglers, collaborators. Those names always ended up dead before the year was out. Some called it a curse, some said it was justice. But the old fishermen knew. They said the sea was angry and it had chosen a voice, not a ghost, not a demon, but something worse, a mother who remembers. You think horror is just about monsters in the dark? No. Horror is watching the person you love sink into the sea and knowing no one will care. Horror is begging for freedom only to be sold again. Horror is returning home and finding the same devils wear different uniforms. Christelle once believed the sea was salvation, but now she knows better. The sea is a witness and it screams every night for those who listen.